On this episode of Still Loading, I'm not crying, you're crying. Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome to this week's episode of Still Loading, and for this week I'm covering the game called Ori and the Blind Forest for the Xbox One as well as PC. And I'm not going to lie guys, this is one of the best games I've played in a very long time. I think this is actually my first indie game that I've ever covered on the podcast, and I freaking loved it. I know I usually talk about a lot of games that I enjoy, because I never find enjoyment about ragging on stuff, though. Some of the games in the 40 for 40 series, were pretty god-awful. But this game is seriously one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played, and the Metroidvania genre, for those who don't know, is basically, it's kind of like an adventure action platformer, but also exploration based, and it's got some mild RPG elements and things of that nature in it. And the whole purpose of it is that you have a big world to explore, but you can only get to different areas based off of the new moves you learn as you progress through the game. So usually these types of games are very tightly designed. They only allow you to get to certain areas at certain times, but if you are very skilled with the game, you have there's possibilities of getting into those areas earlier on, which usually is where speedrunning comes into play, And so Metroidvania's the first really well-known Metroidvania, the game that pretty much defined the genre, is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Now, there are other games like it, but the reason why it became the genre started to be called Metroidvania is because it takes the exploration kind of like level up aspect of Metroid and combine it with like the action platforming of Castlevania. So like Metroid had like action and platforming, but it wasn't quite as intense, I guess. Super Metroid, I guess you could also consider a Metroidvania. I don't know, the delineations and like the specifications of they're very specific. People are really like picky about what they would classify as the first Metroidvania and what isn't. I think from what I've researched, Symphony of the Night is considered the legitimate first Metroidvania game ever released. And since AAA developers don't really make Metroidvanias anymore, a lot of these Metroidvanias have been falling into the indiescape. You might have seen on Instagram somewhat recently, maybe about a week ago or so, I posted a picture of me beating a game called Axiom Verge. And Axiom Verge is another Metroidvania, and it's a good one at that. So Ori and the Blind Forest is an indie Metroidvania, and like I said before, I'm pretty sure it's the first indie game I've ever covered. And the first thing I want to point out about it, and normally I don't really talk or use this as a jumping off point, but I wanted to for this one. This game's art style is absolutely gorgeous. It is one of the best looking games I've ever played. Now, in terms of, if you want to talk about actual graphics, it's 2D. But the artwork is stunning. Imagine, for example, for those who haven't played, I haven't played it yet, actually, come to think of it, but for those who haven't heard of it, Cuphead is a shoot 'em up game that was released for PC and Xbox. That art style is gorgeous. It's 2D, but it's still gorgeous. I kind of equate it to that, where it's not pixelated 2D or anything like that. It's just this stunning, like, almost like, I don't want to call it watercolor, but it's a very gorgeous landscape. You'll look up screenshots of the game. Like the artwork is honestly stunning. It's a beautiful game. So you play through Ori, so the artwork is great, and the storyline is actually really, really good. And hence, kind of calling back to what I said in the intro, it gets you right in the feels. Hence the I'm not crying, you're crying. The first 10 minutes of this game, I swear, are like the first 10 minutes of Up. It breaks you down and rebuilds you in 10 minutes, and you are bawling like a baby by the end of it. It is so, so good. So before I get into the gameplay, because the gameplay is one of my favorite. I mean, obviously, it's a game. I better like the gameplay if it's one of my favorite games. But the story is actually really good, too. So the story revolves around basically a white guardian spirit named Ori. And Ori fell from the spirit tree, which is in the center of this forest known as the Forest of Nibble. Or Nibble? I don't know. Nibble sounds so lame. It actually reminds me of Nibelheim from Final Fantasy VII, just the name, but that's the only similarity. Nothing else is the same. But no, so you play as Ori, and during the opening like cinematic, during a big storm, Ori gets blown away from the Tree of Life. Like she's almost like he. Doesn't really have a gender or anything or a sex or anything like that, but Ori is almost like a fruit or a flower dangling on the tree, and a very strong storm comes out and blows or disconnects Ori from the tree. And this creature named Naru picks Ori up and raises her as her own. And Naru is this like lovable bear-looking yeti type of creature. Very cute, very lovable, and they live many years together, or from what it seems like to me. It could have been a couple of months, but to me it seemed like at least a year or two. And then a cataclysmic event happens. Essentially, the Tree of Life is trying to find Ori because it's one of its children. Ori is one of the Tree of Life's children, and by doing so, it creates a cataclysmic event, and the forest starts to die. And this is all in the first 10 minutes. So spoilers for everything after this. Like, this is in the first 10 minutes, but spoilers now because the next part really got me. Naru dies right in front of not right in front of you, but Naru dies, and it's one of the most heartbreaking things ever. There's a scene in it where it's towards the forest is pretty much dead, and they're running out of food. You see Naru get up, all in cutscenes. You're not controlling Naru, though you do at other points earlier in the game. And you see whatever, walking out to the forest, can't get the fruit, or is able to get only one, gives it to Ori, and she's like, no, I'm fine, and just rests. Ori wakes up, goes higher up in the tree, get a little bit more fruit. Once again, the tree's almost dead, though. Goes back, and when she tries to give Naru the food, Naru is just not moving. And you see Ori climb up on Naru and start nudging her. Oh my god, I'm about to cry. It was just, it was so emotional. It hurts so bad, but it's so beautiful. I'm literally getting a little misty-eyed right now. This is the game. It chokes me up. It's so good. So Ori then is now an orphan once again, and she collapses Ori collapses in the forest, and the Tree of Life then finds Ori and revives Ori. I don't know what gender it is. I don't want to keep saying she, assuming Ori's a girl, but I don't know. So Ori gets revived, and then goes on, starts trying to reverse the cataclysm, trying to find out what happened. And so you go through the world, and you collect power-ups, and you get to different points of the stage, like, different areas of the forest that you couldn't before. The forest is huge. And you find out that the reason for the cataclysm is that when the tree did all this, it killed this owl's babies. And this, I don't even know what the name of the owl is. I'm sure it's listed here somewhere. I'll find it in a little bit. But once Ori gets revived, Ori meets this kind of like a fairy of some sort named Sign, like Sein, and Sign guides Sane is it's just a being of in a shape of a small blue orb, and you just kind of, and Sign, however you pronounce it, guides Ori through the game. And you also use Sign as like different powers, like you can get like electricity like attacks that come from Sign or Sign, and it blows up enemies and stuff like that. And as you progress through the game, Sign's like ancestors, like he takes you to different, like you discover different parts of Sign's whatever's history, and that's how you get different powers. And it's so beautiful. I don't know how to describe it. So the powers that you do get, let's start from there. Let's go from there now. So the powers that you get a lot of them. In the base game, you get 9 different powers, and in the definitive edition, you get an extra 2. So we'll start with the first 9. You get this thing called a spirit flame, which is kind of like that lightning bolt type of thing I was telling you about earlier. You just, you hit the button and it attacks enemies. And as you upgrade it, you can attack more rapidly. You can attack more enemies at once, things of that nature. Wall jump allows Ori to jump off the walls. You also eventually get a wall climb, which makes it a lot easier, because before you just had to like bounce back and forth. Later on, though, you actually get something that lets you hold on to the wall. So you can, that once you get that, it opens up so many places in the game. It's really good. It's really cool. You also get weapons like a charge flame. Double jump is another good thing. But the charge flame pretty much is... do I remember? Oh, yes. I've almost forgot about it. The charge flame is like a little bomb that explodes around Ori, and you can use that to break through barriers to get to more places in the forest. Then you get also double jump. You also get a move called bash. It's exactly how it sounds. You bash enemies with it. Stomp is when, you jump up in the air and you can stomp onto the ground and... kind of release a little shock wave to get rid of some enemies around Ori. And I'm just going to list the rest instead of just like constantly describing him. Kuro's feather. Actually, no, I will describe because I like it. Kuro's feather, it lets you glide. So if you hold one button when you jump in the air, Ori will glide in a direction usually not straight down. It's always in a left or right or something of that nature. But also while steadily falling. I already mentioned climb, and charge jump is the last one from the base 9 moves. So, exactly how it sounds. You charge up or you shoots up into the air higher than you normally could. And then in the definitive edition, you get 2 additional powers. One is light burst and the other is dash. Dash, once again, exactly how it sounds, and it's an awesome move. In the speedrunning community, which I'm not a part of, but I admire from afar, it shortened the game by like an insane amount because you could just blow through things that you normally couldn't have before. And then the light burst move lets you essentially kind of throw grenades, essentially. And you can kind of see there's a little line on the screen that shows you the trajectory that you're going to be throwing this kind of light bomb in. And yeah, so those are all the different moves. And all of those moves, the game expertly combines to give you like a good sense of exploration. Like there's so much you can do in the game. I logged so many hours into it, and once I beat it, I had to go back to literally 100% everything. I still don't think I officially I know there's no platinuming in. I have it for Xbox One. I know there's no platinuming it on Xbox, but essentially, getting all the achievements. There's a couple things I didn't do where it's like very specific things, where you jump off this specific enemy's head while shooting a bolt in the other direction and hitting another. It's like, stuff like that where it's so specific and it's a little hard to do. But I got all the power-ups, upgraded all the power-ups, upgraded. There's also skill trees, which will give you which either A, unlock some of those 9 powers, or B, upgrade those 9 powers, or just give you more health, as well as they don't give you more health. You can find health upgrades and power upgrades, and the power is like your lightning bolt type of thing. And I think the thing that this game does the best is its way of teaching you the mechanics of it. All of the moves you learn very seamlessly blend into the game. It doesn't feel like you were toiling through it until you got that one move and all of a sudden the world opened up. It always felt very organic how the world opened up. And the one thing that I admire, the game design in it is so strong, because the one thing that I loved the most about it was the fact that you end up pulling off these crazy technical moves because the game teaches you how to do it, but the difficulty ramps up so steadily. There's no sudden spike in difficulty or sudden drop. By the end of the game, you're pulling off these crazy complex movement tech and like dodging and attacking all at the same time, while also like there's one move where I don't think I mentioned it. Hold on, let me check on here. Oh, I did mention it. I'm sorry. Bash is the I misdescribed Bash. Hopefully any of you who have played it weren't screaming at me yet, but I will rectify that right now. So the one move that really opens up the game but it doesn't, once again, you don't have that sudden realization like, oh wow, this world's so much more open. It's because it's such a well-designed mechanic, you don't realize it until after you beat the game. So what Bash does is that as you come into proximity of an enemy or an enemy's projectile, you can hit the bash button. What happens, time freezes for a short little while, and you'll see an arrow pop up on the screen, and the direction of the arrow is the arrow that Ori is going to launch off into, and in the opposite direction the enemy will go that way. So it actually there's a lot of mechanics later on where you actually have to purposely launch Ori into a wall, so the projectile that you're bashing off of will go and break something that you can't break normally. And in other ways, it also uses it to get you up to higher areas, so where you can literally bash off from enemy to enemy to enemy. And as the game goes on, they steadily add in projectiles where you have it requires a little bit more skill and timing than just knowing exactly where to go. Because the game starts out with just some hanging like lights. They don't move, and you can bash off of them. They don't hurt you, they don't move, but you can use that, and they're stationary. As the game goes on, it starts throwing enemies that you bash off of, but they move a little bit. And then later on, those enemies are shooting projectiles, which you have to bash off of to get to different areas and climb higher and higher by steadily bashing up and up or something of that nature. And once again, the level of difficulty is such a steady climb. They do... I'm not explaining this well. I'm sorry. I keep like fumbling over my words. The difficulty curve is so gradual. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a gradual difficulty curve, and it's so perfectly executed that you never feel out of control once. Anytime you die, it is 100% your fault, and the difficulty curve like perfectly just brings you up to this high level of play. Because I haven't played it for about a couple months now, and when I popped it back in right before recording, just to kind of get reacquainted with the game, I was in such shock at how bad I was, because before I was doing all these crazy moves, and now I couldn't do anything because that game teaches you such a specific skill set that it's if you're not constantly playing it, it's a little hard to jump back into. Some may say that's a fault, but I think that's... Yes, only if you're playing 100%, you've already gotten all the power-ups, like a New Game Plus or something. But if you're starting from the beginning, it's so easy to get into. It's just that if you haven't played for a while and you're expecting to jump right back into your old save file, you might have a couple hiccups, but you'll get used to it pretty fast. But yeah, no, the gameplay, I can't emphasize this enough how good it is. Like, it is just so solid. And if you have not played it, I highly suggest playing it. Actually, I don't really have much else to say about this game. It's going to be a little bit shorter than my last couple of episodes, mainly just because this will be the third one in a row, so I'm kind of getting a little, I shouldn't say worn out, but it's just a lot, because I wanted to do 2 episodes ago, was the top 10 scary moments in non-horror games, and then last week's episode was Manhunt. So this one's going to be a little bit shorter than normal, but I still made it to the 20-minute mark, or at least from what I'm seeing here, it's close to the 20-minute mark. But no, it's seriously, go play this game. And if you haven't tried Metroidvanias, I would definitely give them a shot. If you have tried Metroidvanias and they're not your cup of tea, still give Ori a shot, even if it's just for the first 10 minutes, because the storytelling and gameplay is just so beautiful. So that pretty much wraps up everything I have to talk about it. Thank you all for listening. You can follow me once again on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. Please also remember to rate, review, and to subscribe the show on iTunes. And you also don't forget, I have a website, stillloadingpodcast.com. So Shout outs. Can't forget the shout outs. Apex in the Abyss, amazing true crime podcast. My buddies over at Two Guys in a Game, another great gaming podcast. My buddy TJ at the Hotter Show, fantastic. Kind of like a little bit of everything. They do music reviews. They do like just conversations and interviews. He recently interviewed the CEO of a company named, COO, one of the high ups at a company named Mean Beard, which is like a beard product brand. Really good interview. Definitely give that a listen. Also wanted to give a shout out to the Amazing Nerd Show, to Drinks with Larry. Singing Mountain is a podcast I really enjoy right now, and the Super Marcato Brothers. No Geeks Allowed, of course. I almost forgot my friends. No Geeks Allowed, that's KNOW. So give them all a listen. They're all great shows. And yeah, that should be it. So thank you all once again for listening, and I will see you all next time.